I had the worst possible abdominal pain you can ever imagine. The best way I can describe it is that imagine you had a person who is holding onto both ends of your stomach and is just trying to like rip it apart. Okay, I would have that kind of pain probably 15 to 20 times a day. I'm the only person in my family out of six who have Crohn's disease, who isn't suffering at the moment and who isn't using any medication. And I'm also the only vegan of the six. Hey, what is going on, guys? So this video is going to be a little bit different from my normal videos. I'm going to be going over my battle, or whatever you want to call it, that I had with Crohn's disease around 4 to 5 years ago, where I basically thought I was going to die, and I ended up losing like 35 pounds and vomiting every day and only able to eat like 200 to 300 calories per day. It was probably the worst period of my entire life, and I had no motivation to do anything. I was just in severe pain at all times. I'll go a little bit more into what the symptoms were as we get more into this video, but I also especially want to cover this because I'm the only person in my family out of six who have Crohn's disease, who isn't suffering at the moment and who isn't using any medication. And I'm also the only vegan of the six. Now, I'm not implying that, okay, wow, I guess the vegan diet is a cure for Crohn's disease, but the data does suggest that eating a whole food plant-based diet, high in fiber and low in sugars and low in animal protein, might be good for Crohn's disease, but we'll get into that a little later. And before we go into what Crohn's disease is and, my journey, oh God, I just said journey, future ex-vegan alert, but whatever. Before we get into all that, I want to talk about something that I realized during the production of this video and some other things. So there are many anti-vegans who claim that the only reason I have the amount of muscle that I have right now is because I built a significant portion of my muscle from animal foods prior to being vegan. Now, although this is somewhat true, during this time suffering from Crohn's, I lost basically all of that muscle that I gained from animal products when I started working out, and then regained all of it back solely through eating plants. So to any of the anti-vegans who have made this insane claim that all the muscle that I have is from my past animal product consumption and consumption of animal protein, well, I lost all of that and then gained it all back with plants. So you're an idiot. And referring back to what I said about how I'm the only person in my family who has Crohn's, who no longer is on meds and also isn't suffering, I just want to say that this video is not meant to say like go vegan and drop your meds. I just find it interesting that I am the only one completely in remission without medication. So what is Crohn's disease? Well, it is a chronic inflammatory disease of the intestines, especially the colon and ileum, associated with ulcers and fistulae, however you pronounce that. Crohn's disease, along with ulcerative colitis, are ever-increasing public health concerns and an etiological enigma due to their unknown causal factors. Among the environmental factors associated with inflammatory bowel disease, diet plays an important role in modulating the gut microbiome and consequently could have a therapeutic impact on the disease course. All right, so let's start with my Crohn's journey. These two pictures are from August 27th, 2015. I weighed around 165 pounds here. This picture was actually taken around 3 months after I officially went vegan and graduated high school in June. I wasn't doing much legwork at the time, so I should have honestly weighed closer to 173 to 175 pounds at this level of body fat, assuming I did legs. That detail is important and you'll understand why later. Now, to be clear, I dealt with my first instance of Crohn's-like symptoms a year prior to these pictures, before starting my senior year of high school. I had 2 months of mild to somewhat moderate abdominal pain, but luckily I somehow entered remission right around when my senior year began, and I decided to eat a plant-based diet around 6 days a week. I'm not showing pictures of this because I don't have access to them at the moment. Fast forward to September 12th, no symptoms. September 19th, no symptoms. Fast forward to June 1st, 2016, and this is where symptoms started and the hell began. I don't have pictures prior to this instance, but I was initially around 185 pounds, and here I believe I dropped to 176 pounds, but not in a good way. So I'm just gonna go over real quick what my symptoms were and just how horrific it all really was. So I had the worst possible abdominal pain you can ever imagine. The best way I can describe it is that imagine you had a person who is holding onto both ends of your stomach and is just trying to like rip it apart. Okay, I would have that kind of pain probably 15 to 20 times a day. It would be so bad that even if I was having like a conversation with somebody, like texting, I couldn't even respond to them when I was flaring up or peaking with this kind of pain. I would literally be in the curled up position on my bed, unable to move, just waiting for the pain to pass. And this would happen after essentially everything that I ate. It wasn't like a case where, oh, this food fucked me up, but this food didn't. It was literally like anything that I ate just fucked me super hard. It was awful. And of course, over time, this led to me not being able to eat anything, or at least not a lot. I was eating like 200 to 300 calories for like a month and a half to 2 months. It was completely awful. And I was also vomiting like all the time. I constantly had like my blood vessels just popped in my face. It was the worst thing ever. I obviously couldn't train at this time. It was just hell. Like, and I didn't know what was going to happen. Like, I literally thought I was going to die, or like, how am I going to ever live healthily again if I literally can't fucking eat? It was like just awful. My inflammation levels were around 10 times more than they should be. My body was just completely fucked. So all of this happening for nearly a month and a half to like 2 months led to this point on July 22nd, where I weighed 155 pounds. I was anemic, felt like complete ass all the time, and took 4 weeks off my job because I was literally incapable of working. And then 3 days later, I took this pic the morning of my colonoscopy, and I weighed around 149 to 150 pounds. This might not look too bad to other people, but coming from somebody who used to look like this, I felt small as fuck. Keep in mind, I hadn't been in the gym for nearly 2 months and was barely able to eat. So eventually I got put on steroids, not anabolic steroids, I wish, not them, but anti-inflammatory steroids, and my symptoms finally started to like level out and like slowly go away. But it wasn't really sustainable for me to long-term be on anti-inflammatory steroids. So eventually we switched over to this other medication, which was an anti-inflammatory, but wasn't necessarily a steroid. And then we slowly weaned myself off of the steroids while keeping the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medication going. And eventually my symptoms just completely went away. And at this point, I was able to eat again. I was small as fuck. And I was also so weak. Like, when I went to the gym, my girlfriend at the time was literally squatting more than me. And like, this obviously was a huge attack on my ego. And I weighed, like I said, like 155. I lost essentially everything. And at this point, like I said, I was able to eat again. So I went super ham with eating, and I was basically trying to get all the muscle back as quick as I could. So these pics are from September 13th, and around 1 month into training and eating again, I had to be eating a calorie surplus every day at this point. Here is September 18th, where I believe I was weighing around 180 pounds. Clearly, muscle memory was on my side, and my excessive eating at this point helped me gain a lot of what I had initially gained prior to my Crohn's attack. I was at a pretty high body fat though, given how much of a surplus I was eating at the time. And so eventually I decided to cut down to 175 pounds so I can at least somewhat see my abs. This was October 20th, 2016. I definitely did not have all my muscle back at this point, but I was getting there. So here is December 6th, 2016, weighing 175. And although that weight was the same as my weigh-in in October, it was clear that I had gained muscle and lost fat since I was leaner, but the same weight. And then here was January 15th, 2017, almost 5 months after weighing 150 pounds, weighing a solid 177 pounds. At this point, I wanted to do a loose bulk and hit 190 pounds just to ensure that I got all of my previous muscle back before doing an extensive cut. This was March 18th, 2017. And then here is July 26th, weighing a lean 176 pounds, 1 year and 1 day after the day in which I weighed 150 pounds. So this is kind of like a year transformation from the peak moment of me dying of Crohn's and being so, light and losing all my muscle, to a year later where I trained and cut and bulked and, was able to eat properly again and train properly again and gain all the muscle back that I had initially lost from when I was not dying of Crohn's. It was also at this point that I got relatively lazy with taking my meds, and then over time I noticed that my symptoms never came back, and then I just stopped taking my meds. So it's been around 4.5 years since I've been off my meds, and I've been symptom-free ever since. Okay, so just gonna make this disclaimer one more time. Before I go into this section suggesting that whole food plant-based diets might be ideal for preventing and treating inflammatory bowel diseases, let me just re-emphasize, if you're suffering from Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis and are taking meds, do not watch this video and just start eating plant-based and dropping your meds. Consult with an expert prior. So I'm just going to start with stating that further research is required to evaluate the role of individual food compounds and complex nutritional interventions with the potential to decrease inflammation as a means of prevention and management of inflammatory bowel disease. But here are some important things to note regardless. The shift to Western dietary patterns is hypothesized to increase pro-inflammatory cytokines, which are pro-inflammatory substances secreted by certain cells. It's also hypothesized to modulate intestinal permeability and alter the intestinal microbiota, promoting a low-grade chronic inflammation in the gut. There's been several large-scale studies that have attempted to elucidate the dietary components that are associated with the risk of developing inflammatory bowel disease. They suggest that the Western diet pattern is a risk factor for inflammatory bowel disease. In a review from 2015, it was noted that the Western-style diet may be a trigger for ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. A systematic review, which contained 19 studies and 2,609 inflammatory bowel disease subjects, reported a negative association between dietary fiber and fruit with Crohn's disease risk. Soluble fiber from fruit may have a protective effect on Crohn's disease. Also, an increased consumption of sweets is positively associated with Crohn's disease. Overall, all of this data suggests that while refined and processed carbohydrates and sweetened beverages are risk factors for inflammatory bowel disease, complex carbohydrates, including fruit, vegetables, and fibers, should be included in the diet to improve the management of inflammatory bowel disease. Similarly, according to this paper, an excessive consumption of animal proteins is associated with an increased risk of developing Crohn's disease, while the consumption of fruits and vegetables was inversely related to the risk of Crohn's disease. And lastly, a large prospective cohort study with 67,581 subjects completed over a 10.5-year period found that a high protein intake, specifically animal protein, meat, not dairy products, was positively associated with an increased risk of inflammatory bowel disease. Alright guys, so there is much more data to go over, but I don't want to make this video any longer than it has to be. I will link the rest of this paper in the pinned comment for those who want to read further. I think this data makes sense of how quickly I was able to get off my meds and be symptom-free. During my first instance of experiencing 2 months worth of Crohn's symptoms, I was eating a very processed diet, which included a high amount of animal protein, with very little fiber, fruit, and vegetables. And although I was vegan in the year prior to my Crohn's disease flaring up the worst it ever has, my diet was highly processed at the time, high in sugar, and low in fiber. It wasn't until after my Crohn's disease really fucked me up that I decided to start consuming a much less processed and high fiber diet filled with fruits and vegetables. This was also around the time that I realized I didn't need my meds anymore. Of course, this is all anecdotal, and we need not rely on specific anecdotes as strong evidence to extrapolate onto large populations, but it is clear that my habits leading up to the development of my Crohn's disease and my habits leading up to my entering of remission for my Crohn's disease without the use of medicine seem to make sense of the data gone over in this video. All right, guys, that is the end of the video. I have no idea how long this is going to be. Don't drop your meds after watching this video. Do your own research, talk to your doctor, especially talk to an expert. Let me know what you thought of this little journey. Did you even really give a shit? Like, I'm not really sure if people really care to hear about this journey. I wanted to make the video anyway, just because I find it interesting, and I finally got access to some of the pictures from when I was suffering with Crohn's. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who is your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird,